Good afternoon from Windsor as the nation prepares to remember the Duke of Edinburgh. His funeral takes place here at St George's Chapel inside Windsor Castle grounds later this afternoon. In line with COVID restrictions, only 30 mourners are allowed to attend. The Archbishop of Canterbury will give a blessing during the service.
As with all funerals, there's a huge sense of privilege that you're with the family, any family, at this remarkable point in their lives.
The Queen will sit alone as she says goodbye to her husband of 73 years. And crowds have been asked to stay away from Windsor this afternoon. Hello and welcome to Windsor Castle, where the funeral of the Duke of Edinburgh will take place in a few hours' time, watched by millions of people across the country and around the world. It will be a small family service because, in line with COVID restrictions, only 30 mourners are allowed into St George's Chapel. The Queen will have to sit alone as she says goodbye to her husband of 73 years. Buckingham Palace says the ceremony will celebrate and reflect the Duke's life and mark his unwavering loyalty to the Queen. Our first report this lunchtime is from our royal correspondent, Nicholas Witchell.
A husband and wife, a photograph from the Queen's private collection, an image from a strong marriage, and a reminder that today there is a wife saying farewell to a beloved partner of 73 years. Inside Windsor Castle, St George's Chapel has been made ready. The Duke of Edinburgh's many decorations have been placed on the altar. Close by, the seat he used to occupy. The enamelled stall plate is still in place, but his insignia as a Knight of the Garter has been removed. It will be in this section of the chapel, known as the choir, where the 30 members of the congregation will be seated around the catafalque bearing the Duke's coffin. The funeral procession will have made its way to the chapel from the castle's quadrangle. Just after 2:40, his coffin will be borne from the state entrance to be placed on the Land Rover hearse the Duke helped to design. At 2:45, the small procession will step off for the 8-minute journey through the castle. Some members of the royal family will walk behind the coffin. The Queen will follow in a limousine. At 2:53, the coffin will arrive at the west steps of St George's Chapel. It will be borne to the top of the steps, where it will pause. At 3 o'clock, a 1-minute silence will be observed before the coffin enters the chapel for the funeral service, which will be presided over by the Archbishop of Canterbury.
As with all funerals, there's a huge sense of privilege that you're with the family, any family, at this remarkable point in their lives where they're grieving someone they loved profoundly. And then with this funeral, there is also that extra sense of huge privilege, but also pride in his life. The pride is not that I'm there. The pride is, here we are celebrating such a wonderful life.
As the Queen and her family prepare for the service, from Buckingham Palace, a montage of images and a poem, The Patriarchs, by the Poet Laureate Simon Armitage.
To presume to eulogise one man is to pipe up for a whole generation. That crew whose survival was always the stuff of minor miracle, who came ashore in orange crate coracles, fought ingenious wars, finagled triumphs at sea with flaming decoy boats and sidestep torpedoes. Major oaks in the wood start tuning up, and skies to come will deliver their tributes. But for now, a cold April's closing moments parachute slowly home, so by mid-afternoon, snow is recast as seed heads and thistledown.
This afternoon's funeral service will end with the lowering of the Duke's coffin to the royal vault below St George's Chapel. Royal Marine buglers will sound the last post, and then action stations, A reminder of the Duke's years of service in the Royal Navy. A reminder too that he was a royal consort with a difference. Distinctive to the end. Nicholas Witchell, BBC News.
And our royal correspondent Sarah Campbell is with me here in Windsor, and we've reflected, of course, so much on the life of the Duke and his achievements, but actually this afternoon thoughts perhaps really should be with the Queen.
Absolutely, and here we are, a royal residence which for so long was the home of the Duke and the Queen. This is where the Duke spent his final months, of course, shielding alongside the Queen. And what a stunning backdrop to a funeral which the palace has said consistently will reflect and celebrate his life of service. Now, when the Queen leaves the state entrance just before 3 o'clock this afternoon, it will be the first time that we will have seen her since the announcement was made last Friday that her husband of 73 years had died. She will follow the procession in a state Bentley, and then, as we've heard, she will follow social distancing in the choir at St George's Chapel. She will wear a mask. She will be separated from family members, as so many families have experienced at funerals over the last year. And the Queen really has led the nation at moments of great happiness and great sorrow over so many years, and one can only imagine how difficult this day will be for her.
And as you say, as for so many families, changes to what might have been this afternoon precisely because of the pandemic.
Exactly. There's no public element. Lots of public would have liked to have taken part. They will be able to do so, but only watching on television or listening to it on radio. Instead of 800 mourners inside the chapel, there will be just 30. So room really only for family and close relatives. The choir will number just 4 people. But the plans mean it will still be a fitting farewell. The procession before it will involve members of the armed forces, over 700 members of the armed forces. They, of course, so important to the Duke, and a reflection and a remembrance of his life of service and his active service during the Second World War.
Sarah Campbell, thank you. Well, here in Windsor, as those final preparations, very final, are made for the funeral, there is a large police presence to try to deter large crowds from gathering because of the pandemic. Beautiful sunshine here at Windsor, but despite that, it would seem that most people have heeded the request from the palace to stay away, and because this entire event this afternoon will be held within the walls of the castle here. Our royal correspondent Daniela Relf reports now on how the people and the town of Windsor are getting ready to remember the Duke.
There was a quiet calm to Windsor this morning. Picture perfect for a day of solemnity and remembrance. Windsor knows how to prepare for a major royal occasion, but today the normal rules don't apply. There are no crowds lining the streets, no royal supporters securing the best spot. COVID regulations have changed how this town will honour the Duke of Edinburgh.
So the message to members of the public is please stay at home, don't make special journeys to Windsor. There won't be anything to see in the town. The ceremonies and events are happening inside the castle, and the best place to see it, if you want to see it, is on TV.
Despite the clear warnings, the pleas from the authorities, there are those who feel they need to be here in person, to be present in this most royal of towns on a day of enormous significance. At Windsor's train station, passengers were arriving to honour the Duke.
I was quite overwhelmed with the whole thing, the Prince passing. I mean, something I felt I had to, do today is to be here.
So it's wonderful to come out today and just feel part of a celebration of his life, fundamentally, and for the Queen to have her close friends and family around her.
I'd say a little bit emotional, but it's a beautiful day, and what better day, with the sun shining.
The military associations with Windsor are obvious and long-lasting. This week, the preparations and rehearsals have seen that on show. And many individual servicemen and women taking part in the funeral procession will have met the Duke of Edinburgh.
Those people who had a close affiliation, he would have visited their units, and a great many of them will have had personal memories of meeting the Duke of Edinburgh. And so I think for them it means a huge amount to be able to be out there today paying their respects.
In a week when many lockdown restrictions have lifted, several businesses around the castle will be closed until after the funeral. One of the few ways the Windsor community can publicly pay tribute today.
We do have a lot of his staff that come down here as well from the castle, especially the grooms of the castle, who we and I know personally, so our thoughts and prayers are with them as well.
Unlike many celebratory events in recent years, Windsor's tribute today will be restrained. Like the rest of the country, at 3 o'clock, the town will fall silent, in memory of a man so strongly connected with this royal county. Daniela Ralph, BBC News, Windsor.
Well, there are commemorations happening across the country to celebrate the life of Prince Philip, including in Edinburgh. Although the Scottish Government has told the public not to go to any royal location to pay respects because of the risk of spreading coronavirus. Our Scotland correspondent Alexandra Mackenzie is at Edinburgh Castle. Alexandra, what's happening there?
Yes, I am at Edinburgh Castle, which is just on the top of the Royal Mile, and it's a lovely day here. A few people have gathered, although, as you say, the Scottish Government has advised people to stay at home. There will be a gun salute at 3 o'clock. That will mark the beginning and the end of that 1 minute silence. Now, the Duke of Edinburgh had spent a lot of time here. He was Chancellor of the University for nearly 60 years, but people across the country are remembering him. People in Gordonston, where he was at school in the 1930s and got his love of the sea, which led to that naval career. And students and pupils and teachers have been out on the waters around the Murray coast today, and they've cast a wreath into the water to remember the Duke, who was at the school so many decades ago. And a lone piper was on the shore playing a tribute for the Duke. And at 3 o'clock, pupils and staff also there will remember the Duke of Edinburgh in that minute's silence. And back here in the city of Edinburgh, Scotland's First Minister, she's at her official residence, Bute House, and at 3 o'clock she will come out and again, like many others, will remember the Duke of Edinburgh, who spent so much time in Scotland. Also people in Royal Deeside, the family spent so many summers in Aberdeenshire. People there got to know the family very well and will be remembering them this afternoon.
Alexandra Mackenzie, thank you. Well, Prince Philip was born into the Greek royal family in 1921 on the island of Corfu. But after a coup d'etat the following year, the young prince and his family were forced to flee. Correspondent Jenny Hill has been to the island of his birth and has been speaking to people there.
For this son of Greece, no tranquil retreat. Prince Philip was born into a volatile country torn by war.
So this is the house where Prince Philip was born.
What was Greece like when Prince Philip was born?
It was a very difficult period for our history after all of these wars with Turkey. And for this reason, the family of Prince Philip was obligated to leave the country.
And he was taken away in a fruit box, an orange crate.
The legend says.
It was to be a turbulent childhood. The family moved around Europe, and then as his mother's mental health worsened, broke up. Prince Philip, isolated, left to the care of relatives. It's thought he never returned to the island of his birth, but he's remembered here. Even as they prepare for an Orthodox Easter in the church where he was baptised.
Queen Elizabeth will feel lonely after 73 years of common life. I think it's a shock. It's something that happened suddenly, and it's like a blackout. So I think we all need time.
But the family connection lives on. During an official visit to Greece last month, Prince Charles spoke of his deep affection for his father's native country. He's said to visit Corfu often in a private capacity. Few tourists here now. The pandemic has all but closed the island's doors.
Like so many other places in Europe, Corfu is restricted by coronavirus measures. There'll be no large public events to commemorate the Duke's passing. But as people in Britain prepare for his funeral, many here will be quietly reflecting on the life of a man whose story, after all, began right here.
A man who grew from the chaos of childhood into someone upon whom his family, his country, could depend. Jenny Hill, BBC News, Corfu.
Well, the Queen has described the death of Prince Philip as having left a huge void in her life. They first met in 1934. They got married after the war in 1947, a relationship spanning 9 decades. Our Home Affairs editor Mark Easton reports from Liverpool on how the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh have been a remarkable team in the story of the monarchy.
Liverpool gives a true Lancashire welcome to Princess Elizabeth.
In spring 1949, a young couple went to Liverpool's Anglican Cathedral at the end of Hope Street and drew a lover's knot on the third pier of the nave. The entwined E and P remains carved into the fabric of the building to this day, the physical embodiment of a marriage that was to last more than 73 years.
The Princess and the Duke move into the giant...
Among the choir boys attending that day was Jeff Holliday, now in his 80s. He recently lost his wife, Helen, after almost 50 years of marriage, and feels for the Queen as she bids a final farewell to her husband.
I would say that the Queen is feeling this tremendously at the moment. Even though you're prepared in a way for such an event, and I feel for her actually, and I have a lot of respect for the Duke as well, because I thought he was a great guy.
I just can't imagine what it would be like after 72 years of having somebody that you can have a moan to, or you can go home to and express your disappointments or problems or the things that are worrying you. And now they're just to be an empty void.
Elizabeth and her husband waved to the cheering crowds.
Their wedding in 1947 was a distraction from post-war austerity, a flash of colour on the hard road we travel, as Churchill put it.
You are now husband and wife together.
This weekend, Victoria and Kevin got married in Liverpool Town Hall. A moment of joy in a land struggling to recover from the pandemic.
The best feeling ever.
Yeah, actually, just to be able to actually do it.
Yeah,
you know,
so happy.
It's done and,
In Liverpool, as across the Commonwealth, the Queen and Prince Philip came to represent constancy and commitment, a partnership that endured the pressures of family turbulence and public scrutiny.
I think that the main lesson that we've learned is that tolerance is the one essential ingredient of any happy marriage. And you can take it from me that the Queen has the quality of tolerance and abundance.
And I think Jack always thought I was his best friend as well.
Pat and Jack Begetigan will celebrate their 67th wedding anniversary tomorrow. Still together in their Merseyside home, they respect the example set by the Queen and Prince Philip.
She must be devastated losing her husband after all this time. I mean, he's been there steadfast, standing, not beside her, but, you know.
Just behind her.
It's very difficult, that, isn't it?
What strikes me about your generation is that real sense of duty and of resilience and determination.
It's just being tolerant, I think, and enjoying each other's company is the most.
I'm being lucky.
Being what?
Being lucky.
Yeah, we were lucky finding each other.
He has quite simply been my strength and stay all these years, and I and his whole family owe him a debt greater than he would ever claim, or we shall ever know.
The Queen made her wedding vows before God, to love, to cherish, and by tradition to obey, till death us do part. Mark Easton, BBC News, Liverpool.
And let's just take a look at some of today's other news stories. And the number of people who have died with coronavirus worldwide has passed 3 million. Cases of the virus continue to surge in large parts of the world, including India and Brazil. The figures compiled by Johns Hopkins University are thought unlikely to represent a full tally of people who have died. President Biden has reversed a decision to retain a Trump-era cap on the number of refugees allowed into the US. President Biden had said he would keep the figure to 15,000, but faced with a build-up of migrants on the country's border with Mexico, the cap will be raised next month. NASA has chosen Elon Musk's SpaceX company to build a lander to return humans to the moon this decade. The vehicle will carry the next man and the first woman to the lunar surface under the space agency's Artemis program. SpaceX was competing against a group part financed by the Amazon founder Jeff Bezos. Now, the first fans to return to a sporting event have arrived at the Crucible in Sheffield for the World Snooker Championship. It marks the start of the government's events research programme, with a third of the venue's capacity being allowed in before gradually being increased. Our sports correspondent Laura Scott reports.
An iconic venue for a significant moment. Opening its doors to 300 snooker fans, the Crucible was tasked with kick-starting a science-led programme of crowd pilots that could have a pivotal bearing on what this summer's live events look like across the country. Those in charge feel a responsibility to get it right.
There is a huge amount of pressure on the team here. It is about the wider picture. The government test is about, can we produce protocols which will allow other venues to open? That's cinemas, it's theatres, it's everything that would be a public gathering in an indoor space. So there's a lot at stake here, and certainly these first few days are going to be very challenging for us.
In order to get in, ticket holders had to show proof of a negative lateral flow test and sign a consent form to take part in the government's events research programme. They've also been asked to have PCR tests before and after the event to help provide data on any transmission risk. But those who were extremely vulnerable, under 18 or pregnant, were advised not to attend. Having spent so many months away from live sport, there is said to be some reticence among fans to attend events like these again, and no session has yet sold out. But for some fans we spoke to, the opportunity to be back watching the action live is one to savour. Defending world champion Ronnie O'Sullivan said in advance of the tournament he wanted protection from over-exuberant fans, but the lucky few to be inside stayed calm, as did he as he held out a tight opening frame. If he makes it to the final, a full house will be permitted, marking the first time a capacity crowd has been allowed since before COVID. Other pilots are taking place at Wembley, with 4,000 fans attending tomorrow's FA Cup semi-final. The sight of packed crowds is one that not just sport has missed, but music and arts too. Depending on how the next few weeks go, it might not be long till they're back. Laura Scott, BBC News, Sheffield.
Now, we will, of course, talk more about the story that dominates here today from Windsor. This is a town no stranger to royal events, but as we've been reflecting, today only 30 guests are allowed to attend the Duke of Edinburgh's funeral. Our correspondent Graham Satchell has been speaking to some of the people involved with today's preparations.
At their barracks in Windsor, state trumpeters from the Band of the Household Cavalry are having their final rehearsal for this afternoon's ceremony. These trumpeters have played at royal weddings, state banquets, the opening of Parliament, but there is a real pride being involved in today's service.
It is a little bit nerve-wracking, but you hear so much and hear so many stories, especially now, of what he did for the Duke of Edinburgh Awards, what he did for the military. Such a very, very inspirational man.
The trumpeters have met Prince Philip over and over again and remember his playful sense of humour.
He would often walk through, and whilst we were playing, he would go, "What's on the flip side?" referring to the old LPs, and would tune your music over whilst you're playing to see what was on the flip side, and then walk off sort of mischievously, sort of grinning. But it was always a sort of real pleasure, to be around and work in their presence.
From the roof terrace of Castleview Retirement Home, they have quite a view of Windsor Castle. The residents here have all been vaccinated and are in one large bubble, so can watch today's funeral without social distancing. They have fond memories here of a man who made Windsor his home.
Living in Windsor for almost 50 years, we actually feel very close to the royal family here. We sort of feel as though they are sort of a family, part of our family.
He was such a charismatic, charming, with such a great sense of humour that you just want to be there. You want to be here. You want to be here for the Queen and her family as well.
There'll be quite a bit of piping, bugling and trumpeting at today's funeral to reflect the Duke's military past. After the Royal Marines play the last post, the state trumpeters will play this, the Reveille. It signifies the start of a new day, as one chapter of history comes to a close. Graham Satchell, BBC News, Windsor.
And let's just get the final thoughts of our royal correspondent, Sarah Campbell. Just remind us how the afternoon will progress, Sarah.
Well, I think, Jane, this is a service which will very much reflect the Duke's two great passions. He was a family man and he was a military man. So at just 2:45, his coffin draped in his personal standard with his sword and naval cap will be placed upon this Land Rover hearse, of course, which we know he designed. Some of the 730 service personnel taking part will line the processional route. Members of his family, his children and some of his grandchildren, Prince Harry and Prince William, will walk behind the Land Rover. The Queen will follow in the state Bentley. There will be a minute's silence at 3 o'clock when the coffin reaches the steps of St George's Chapel. It will be intimate. There will just be 30 mourners, but despite the limitations and the fact that it will feel different to previous royal funerals, the palace are very clear that this will be a very fitting farewell.
Sarah Campbell, thank you very much. And there is, of course, coverage of all the afternoon's ceremony and that family funeral service here at Windsor Castle throughout the day here on BBC News. I'll leave you with a look at the weather. Here's Susan Powell.
Thank you, Jane. Good afternoon. A very quiet weather picture across the UK at the moment. Widespread blue skies and sunshine as reflected from our satellite picture. But look closely, you can see a few puffs of cloud developing here and there. And that will be the story through this afternoon. There may be a little bit of passing cloud, but it stays dry. The winds are light. And the temperatures just about getting up into the mid-teens to the south, I think, but typically 12 to 14. Heading through the evening and overnight, it stays rather quiet as well. There'll be a lot of evening sunshine. Into the small hours, though, a weather front does work its way into Northern Ireland and Western Scotland, and it will bear some rain here. And with the presence of the cloud, it will also be milder overnight for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Elsewhere, a frost developing once again, rural lows -2, -3. For Sunday, high pressure from Scandinavia, as we have today, will mean a lot of dry and fine weather, but this front does still try and eke in to the northwest. However, the front's really on a hiding to nothing because it's pushing into the high and the front is fizzling out all the while. So on Sunday, essentially, it's a case of thicker cloud and some light patchy rain for Northern Ireland and Scotland, but certainly it won't be as bright here as it has been today. Although temperatures don't struggle too much, we're still getting up to 10 to 12 degrees here, 15 for the south, where we keep the widespread sunshine. And then our story for the week ahead is the dry weather. We've seen precious little rain across many parts of England and Wales so far this April, and looking on to the week ahead, there's not much to come either. High pressure from Scandinavia pulls away through the week, but high pressure builds from the west. So what we will see is a continuation of fair weather moving on into the end of the week and even further afield than that. But on a plus side, the nights should become a little milder.
Susan, thank you. And of course, we approach now the beginning of our special programme to mark the funeral of the Duke of Edinburgh, which gets underway in Windsor here later this afternoon. You can follow that, of course, throughout the day on BBC News. Goodbye.